The arena thrummed with a sound like a living storm, a thunderous chorus of alien voices that shook the air. Rows upon rows of towering beings crowded the Colosseum's obsidian tiers, their luminous eyes fixed on the sandy pit below. Tonight's spectacle had been promised for cycles, a trial by combat, a test of strength to determine whether the upstart species from the backwater world called Earth had any right to stand among the star-faring civilizations. Most of the crowd came not in curiosity, but in anticipation of mockery, eager to see the fragile Deathworlder humiliated. The announcers spoke in booming, many-throated tones, laughing as they introduced the champion of the Vral Dominion, a mountain of scaled flesh and plated armor whose name was already carved into legends for killing 100 foes in ritual duels. Against him, they said, the humans had sent not a soldier, not a weapon, but a girl. She entered the pit barefoot, each step sinking into the pale sand. Her figure was slight compared to the hulking giant across from her, a lean silhouette clothed only in a simple tunic, her skin marked with scars that told stories no alien could read. Her dark hair was tied back, exposing a face both calm and unsmiling, her eyes fixed not on the crowd but on her opponent. To the gathered masses, she looked laughably fragile, little more than a juvenile who had wandered into the wrong place. Yet there was something unsettling in her composure, a stillness that contrasted with the restless energy of the champion pawing at the ground like a predator about to strike. Whispers ran through the arena. Some jeered, calling humans brittle, weak, barely above vermin. Others hissed about insult. Why would a species desperate for recognition risk their cause on a child? The Vral champion rumbled deep in his chest, a sound that echoed like grinding stone, and spread his forearms wide in a gesture that was half challenge, half mockery. He spoke words in his guttural tongue, promising to end the fight quickly, to show mercy by crushing her skull in a single blow. The crowd roared approval, already certain of the outcome. She gave no reply. She simply breathed, slow and steady, rolling her shoulders as though limbering for nothing more than morning exercise. Those closest to the pit leaned forward, trying to decipher the faint curl of her lips. Was it a smirk? No, more subtle, an expression of someone who had measured the world around her and found nothing in it unfamiliar. Her silence was not submission, but patience. High above, in the gilded balcony reserved for the council, diplomats and warlords from a dozen species watched with varying degrees of amusement and contempt. The stakes were more than personal. If the girl fell as expected, Earth would be dismissed as a pathetic death-world curiosity, barred from treaties, denied resources, forced into obscurity. If by some miracle she survived, humanity would gain a seat at the table, recognition carved out in the blood, and spectacle the galaxy respected most. Combat. The rules were simple. No weapons, no armor. Only flesh, bone, and will. The champion began his ritual display, slamming his fists into his armored chest with enough force to make the Colosseum's foundations tremble. Sparks leapt where claw met scale, and the air filled with the musk of his species' pheromones, a scent of intimidation designed to weaken prey. The crowd answered with stomps that rattled through the sand. The girl did not flinch. Instead, she crouched low, running her fingertips across the ground as if feeling its weight. When she straightened, her eyes locked with his. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition that for all the pomp and ceremony, this was nothing more than survival. She had survived worse. In the recesses of her memory flickered images of a childhood spent on a planet where danger was not spectacle, but daily ritual. Forests where predators struck without warning, rivers that could sweep the strongest swimmer into oblivion, storms that tore apart cities as though they were paper toys. On Earth, life meant learning to endure, to adapt, to never underestimate what nature could do. That training did not come with titles or applause. It came in scars etched into her skin, in the instinctive way her body shifted to balance, in the steadiness of her gaze. Here in the arena, she was no different. She was merely doing what she had always done, surviving a world that wanted her dead. The announcer's voice boomed, shaking dust from the high arches of the Colosseum. He declared the terms once more, his words rolling like thunder. Victory would mean ascension. Defeat would mean extinction. The crowd roared approval, a living wall of sound that pressed down upon the fighters like a storm tide. The champion pounded the ground with his fists, demanding that the duel begin. The girl remained utterly still, her calm composure creating an island of silence in the midst of chaos. At last, the gong sounded, reverberating through the arena like the heartbeat of a giant. The crowd leapt to its feet, anticipation blazing in their many-colored eyes. The champion lunged forward, his massive frame blotting out the lights above, claws gleaming as they reached for her throat. The girl shifted her weight, her muscles coiling with the subtle precision of a predator not yet unleashed. And then, as the first strike descended with the force of an avalanche, she moved. The champion's blow came down like a collapsing mountain, claws tearing through the air with lethal intent. The ground split as a strike missed, sand and stone erupting in a shower that pelted the first rows of the crowd. Gasps and laughter mingled overhead, the audience convinced the girl had merely been lucky to sidestep in time. But her movement had not been luck, it was exact, measured, the shift of a body trained to waste no energy. She slid across the sand, light on her feet, her breathing steady even as the Colosseum vibrated with the force of his attack. The alien bellowed in rage, all four arms raised as he swung again. Each strike was fast for his size, but the girl's seemed to flow like water, bending, ducking, slipping beneath blows that would have reduced her to pulp had they connected. The crowd jeered, calling her a coward, accusing her of fleeing the fight. Yet the keen-eyed among them noticed her gaze was never panicked. She was studying him, each movement, each pattern of muscle and joint, the rhythm of his breath. He pressed harder, sweeping with his tail, stomping with taloned feet, seeking to corner her against the wall of the pit. Dust rose in choking clouds as his fury tore furrows into the ground. When at last she moved forward, it was with sudden precision. Her fist struck his ribs, a sharp jab that looked insignificant against his colossal frame. The impact made a dull thud, drawing laughter from the stands. The champion's booming laugh echoed theirs as he reached to seize her. But his smile faltered when she struck again, this time at the same point, and his body jerked as though surprised. He snarled, shaking off the sting, but for the first time he looked down at her not as prey, but as something less predictable. Her blows lacked the spectacle of his, but they were placed with surgical intent. She aimed for joints, for the soft places between plates of armor, for the tender throat that pulsed beneath his scales. He lashed out in frustration, his claws raking the air as she ducked under his guard and drove a sharp elbow into the inside of his knee. The crowd fell momentarily silent when the giant stumbled, balance faltering before he righted himself with a furious roar. Whispers spread like fire among the spectators. They had seen his stumble, seen how the girl had drawn it from him not by chance, but through deliberate precision. The announcer's tone cracked for the first time, disbelief creeping into words that had been dripping with mockery moments before. The champion's eyes narrowed, fury smoldering there. He abandoned showmanship, his movements no longer theatrical but brutal, focused. He lunged low, claws scraping trenches into the sand, and this time one strike clipped her shoulder, spinning her sideways. Pain flashed across her face as blood welled from the gash, but she steadied herself, refusing to fall. He saw the wound and pressed forward, certain that her fragile body could not withstand many more hits. The audience cheered, their confidence restored. Yet when she straightened, her lips pulled back in a thin smile, not of joy, but of recognition. She had felt the weight of his strike, measured it, and knew now exactly what it could do. He might be stronger, might tower over her, but he was predictable. His movements, while terrifying, belonged to a fighter who had never truly been forced to struggle. He had crushed weaker foes by sheer mass and intimidation. Against her, those weapons lost their edge. The next exchange was faster, sharper. He came at her with relentless force, but she no longer yielded ground. Each time he swung, she was already moving, guiding his momentum away, slipping into spaces too small for his size to follow. She struck again and again, each blow subtle yet deliberate, the repeated impact building pain in places his armor could not protect. The crowd's laughter turned to restless murmurs as the duel stretched longer than any had predicted. Blood trickled down her arm, staining her tunic, but her eyes gleamed with focus. Memories rose unbidden. Nights spent beneath the scream of storm winds, days where hunger forced her to track prey larger than herself, mornings where she awoke to the sound of predators tearing each other apart. On Earth, the weak perished quickly. The strong endured not by power alone, but by learning, by patience, by knowing when to strike. That truth lived in her bones, guiding her now as surely as instinct. The champion roared and charged, aiming to crush her beneath his sheer mass. She sidestepped at the last heartbeat, her hands snapping out to grip his arm, twisting with brutal leverage. A sickening crack rang through the arena as one of his elbows bent the wrong way. He howled, staggering, and for the first time the audience did not cheer. A wave of unease rippled through them, an acknowledgement that the impossible had begun to happen. He swung wildly, his injured limb hanging at an unnatural angle, his strikes losing their precision as rage overtook him. She pressed the advantage, darting close enough to drive a fist into his throat before slipping away. He gagged, spitting blood, his massive chest heaving. The announcer's voice faltered entirely now, replaced by an eerie silence from thousands of watchers who had come expecting mockery and were instead witnessing revelation. The girl's chest rose and fell with steady rhythm, her body slick with sweat and blood. She did not celebrate, did not taunt. Her eyes remained locked on him, cold and unyielding. To her, this was not sport but necessity. She had been sent not merely to survive, but to prove, through blood and will, that her people would not be dismissed. The champion stumbled, his steps heavy, yet his pride drove him forward. He towered above her still, battered but unwilling to yield, his voice rasping threats even as his body betrayed him. She circled slowly, each step deliberate, watching for the moment when his fury would leave him open. As he lunged one final time, reckless and desperate, the girl planted her feet, her muscles coiling with quiet certainty. The crowd leaned forward, breath held, as Predator and Deathworlder collided once more. The duel, once dismissed as farce, had become a question that none dared answer yet. Could the galaxy's mightiest champion truly fall to bare human hands? The champion's lunge carried the force of desperation, a wounded beast trying to reclaim dignity with one last act of destruction. His massive body struck the sand where she had been standing, claws gouging deep trenches as his momentum dragged him forward. She pivoted, calm as the storm's eye, and caught his nearest arm in both hands. With a sharp twist and a shift of her hips, she wrenched the joint past its limit. The crack resounded like a gunshot. The crowd's roar collapsed into stunned silence as one of the galaxy's most feared warriors dropped to his knees, his upper limbs now hanging broken and useless. He bellowed, a guttural sound thick with fury and disbelief, his massive head swinging toward her with predatory intent. He lunged with his lower arms, slashing at her torso. She leaned back just enough, his claws brushing the air an inch from her ribs, then drove her heel into his throat. The impact forced him backward, coughing blood into the sand, his body convulsing as he struggled to breathe. The spectacle silenced even the announcers. For the first time in centuries, the great Vral champion looked mortal. The girl did not pause to revel in the moment. Her movements carried the same precision as before, but there was now a growing intensity, as if each strike carried not only her will to survive but also the burden of a species fighting to be acknowledged. Her face remained composed, yet her eyes burned with cold resolve. She darted in again, striking his leg with a sharp kick that bent it at an unnatural angle. The beast toppled, crashing into the sand with a force that made the arena tremble. Gasps rippled through the stands. The once invincible champion lay sprawled, reduced to flailing with two functional limbs. His size had become his prison, his bulk a disadvantage against an enemy who refused to meet him on his terms. She circled him like a predator now, not the hunted but the hunter, every step deliberate, measured, inevitable. His growls became curses, his voice breaking into desperate promises of vengeance. She did not answer. Her silence was more terrifying than any taunt could have been. He lashed out one last time, sweeping with his tail in a move that had ended countless lives before. She leapt, agile as a striking hawk, landing atop the thrashing appendage and running its length until she was on his back. Before he could react, her arms locked around his thick neck. The crowd erupted in alarm, some screaming warnings, others urging her to finish it. He reared up, thrashing violently, his massive body twisting and rolling as he tried to dislodge her. But she held firm, muscles straining with the raw strength of someone who had survived against odds far greater than spectacle. The struggle seemed to last forever. His claws tore furrows in the sand, his tail whipped with thunderous cracks, but his movements slowed as oxygen deserted him. His bellowing cries turned into choked gasps, then desperate wheezes. Her grip tightened, her arms trembling with the effort, yet her resolve did not falter. The champion who had slain hundreds fell to his knees, his colossal form weakening beneath the grip of a single Deathworlder girl. At last, with a final twist of her arms and a sickening snap, his body went still. The silence that followed was total, a void that swallowed the Colosseum whole. Thousands of eyes stared, unblinking, at the human who now stood over the broken carcass of their champion. Blood dripped down her arms, staining the sand beneath her feet. She released his neck and stepped back, breathing heavily but steady, her posture unshaken. For a moment, no one moved. The weight of the scene hung in the air like a suspended blade, waiting to fall. Then the murmurs began.
Shock.
Disbelief.
Fear.
The impossible had happened before their very eyes. The mightiest warrior of the Vral Dominion lay dead, slain not by another champion, not by weapon or machine, but by the bare hands of a human they had dismissed as fragile. Her eyes swept across the audience, not gloating but unyielding. She saw their disbelief, their horror, their awe. She raised her chin slightly, a gesture not of arrogance, but of defiance, as if daring them to deny what they had witnessed. In that moment, she was not merely one woman in a pit. She was the embodiment of her species, the proof that humans were not prey to be dismissed but predators born of a world where survival itself was the harshest teacher. The announcers struggled to find their voices, their usual booming bravado replaced by stammering uncertainty. Some in the crowd began to chant, hesitant at first, then louder, the rhythm of her species' name rising like a storm front. Others hissed in fear, demanding vengeance, muttering of curses, of omens, of the dangers humanity posed if one of their own could bring down a titan. The counselors on the high balcony whispered furiously, their expressions ranging from outrage to cold calculation. She did not wait for judgment. Instead, she stood over the corpse and placed one bloodied hand against her chest, bowing her head once. A gesture of respect for the dead, alien though he was. The act startled the watchers, who had expected savagery but instead saw discipline. Then she turned and began walking toward the exit gate, every step deliberate, her shoulders squared. Behind her, the arena buzzed with arguments, panic, and awe. Her silence lingered louder than any speech, echoing in the hearts of those who had witnessed the duel. The girl had not only destroyed their champion, she had shattered their certainty, forced them to reconsider everything they believed about the so-called fragile humans. The blood-stained sand bore witness to the transformation. What had begun as spectacle had ended as revelation. And though the duel was finished, its consequences had only just begun to unfold. The galaxy, trembling in disbelief, would never again look at humanity the same way.